Hello and welcome to this video on the WMD Clutch, a long-awaited hi-hat module that does a lot more than you might expect. Here's what's to come in the video. This video is sponsored by WMD. Clutch is no doubt the most anticipated hi-hat module release we've seen in Eurorack. The whole premise of the module is based around playing closed and open hi-hats across two separate sound sets called surfaces. WMD say, and I quote, "Clutch is inspired by the precision and expression of real hi-hats. Clutch is a dual-layer sample-based percussion module designed to create dynamic, playable and versatile hi-hat sounds. It really nails everything from more simple XOX-style drum machine sounds, music production style filtered and layered hi-hats and percussion, and even multi-sampled, more human and real expressive hi-hat playing. There's a timing mark on screen. Skip ahead if you just want to hear the sounds out of the module, or skip right ahead to the patches, techniques and ideas for a whole range of different beats, where we even turn Clutch into a crazy Audiorate complex oscillator. But for now we'll have a verbal feature rundown, and that's going to take a while as it's an amazingly comprehensive and feature-packed module for what at first might seem like a simple hi-hat or percussive sample player. So you play the sounds via the closed and open trigger inputs, and if you trigger both at the same time, that creates an accent. And by holding this switch to the left, there's an accent LED that will select whether an accent is a closed sound or an open sound. There's also a choke input, which will choke off the sound like, say, grabbing a cymbal in the real world or cutting off a sample. With the dual layer approach to the module, we have some global controls and some for sides A and B, and we can manually crossfade from the surface A to surface B sounds, and we also have a CV input A/B to CV control that crossfading too. Starting with surface B as it's the simplest, the surface B controls have a white background and black text, and the surface B sounds are baked into the module, you can't change them. You select the surface B sounds by pushing the switch to the left and using this parameter to select one of 9 sounds. With the switch in the middle, we control the pitch of surface B, and going left and right of centre will pitch up and down from unity pitch. With the switch to the right, this becomes a global low-pass filter for the whole module that's really handy to perform with, but also for placing the sounds in your mixes without needing other modules. Surface A plays back from an included SD card, and you press the button top right to change through different banks of sounds shown by LED colour. And I'll put on screen all the different banks and colours to show you what they are. And once you've selected a bank, you select your particular closed and open samples from the Surface A control, and you have a Surface A CV input to modulate through those different sounds. Surface A has its own pitch control, and that also has a pitch A CV input. There's a global release control, and again that has a CV input. And then there's a second assignable control and switch set. If we switch that to the left to BAL, that's the balance of the closed and open hi-hat sounds on this dial. In the middle, it's a release offset to offset the release of the closed hi-hat relative to the open hi-hat. And switching to the right, that becomes a high-pass filter, Like the low pass on the other side, incredibly useful for performance sweeps and also just placing the sound right in a mix. There's then a fantastic little switch here which is CV on and off. It's like a performable mute for all your CV inputs, allowing you to do some crazy full-on sonic changes and then turn them off back to static sounds, or just as a useful feature for setting up modulation and bypassing things as you go. The module also works with a comprehensive dynamics and velocity section, as well as the ability to trigger accents as we've mentioned. We have a velocity input, which is a CV input to directly control the level of your sounds, whether you say want to fade sounds up and down with LFOs, envelope in bursts of hi-hats, or sequence your own dynamics. It's a really musical and expressive addition to the module. The module also has a feel control, which is enabled by holding this switch to the right, and you see that LED come on. This will engage a preset rhythm and pattern of different pattern length and different volume changes, and you can switch left and right to change through these LEDs, and I'll put on screen now what these different patterns are, and as you're triggering these sounds, they move through these feel patterns, adding dynamics to your output. And if you trigger an accent while you have feel on, that will reset the feel pattern too, allowing you to be even more playful with these feel dynamics. Finally, there's a set of 8 effects built into the module, and those 8 effects are on screen now, which are a Sputter distortion, Bitcrush distortion, comb filter, DJ filter, dub echo, chorus, reverb, and glitch. You enter the effects control by holding this button, and that makes this top LED flash. While you're in this mode, you use this switch to cycle through, and these LED colours change, changing those different effects types. While you're in this effects control mode, the bottom 2 parameters become effects parameter and effects intensity. And you always have an effects parameter CV input that's always active, whether you're in the effects control mode or not. If you hold that button again, it will stop flashing with the effects selected colour and just go back to being a bank control. Your effects, however, do remain active whether you're in this control or not, as you set them. There's even more details on the setup and some customizations in the manual for Clutch. You can swap out those Surface A sounds, which just need to be 48 kHz 16-bit WAV files. And I bet you weren't expecting such a big feature set. I certainly wasn't, but I'm absolutely glad that Clutch does everything it does. The timing index is down below for you to skip around. I made a bank of sounds to try out with the module, and I'll play those alongside the different effects to show them in context without talking about them between the patches and techniques that I do demonstrate and talk about. I'll highlight on screen what's happening with those. There's loads of detail down in the description below, so check that out, and without further ado, let's dive in. So to start with, let's take a look at the sounds, and that's going to be a kind of basic look around the controls as well. And we'll start on that B side, as these are baked in sounds that you can't change. We'll switch across to Surface B for this control. These are the assignable controls. We have a classic XOX drum machine style hat. Another XOX sample. Real hi-hats. Different XOX classic drum machine sounds. Another one. Shaker. Notice the difference between the closed and open rhythms there. Another shaker, or like an egg shaker type sound. Tambourine. And the noise hi-hat. It's worth remembering that although those B controls, the sounds can't be changed themselves, we do have that pitch B on that middle switch position. So you can get in and repitch them, and they respond to the release as well. Now going across the side A, we'll just quickly fly through these because you can change them all. Let's go around to the white bank to start with. Classic drum machine hi-hats. And interestingly for me, what's really quick is if you like that sound but it's too thick and chunky, you can just drop that release and say high pass into a really different sound really quickly. The red bank is multi-samples of some real hi-hats. modulate in some really realistic hi-hat patterns there. Green is different combinations of real hi-hats. Blue is more real hi-hats, but this time played with sticks, mallets, and different attachments on them. And again, it's so easy just to really change the overall vibe. Orange is what they're calling Techno shakers. And I'm just trying to fly through these quickly. Cyan is at 2600. Samples. More at 2600 on the violet. It's this LED colour we're watching here. And then some lo-fi tape style hats. High passing something really chunky, thinning it out, layering it against, say, a shaker. Then we can filter. You can really get in and customize very quickly. I haven't really felt the need to change the samples that much. There's a lot in there to get going with, and it's easy to sculpt and change them. But of course, change those sounds out on the card as you like. So one thing I really love about Clutch is just how kind of weird, quirky, glitchy and odd it can be, but how easy it is to push and pull in and out of that type of behaviour. Play around and then I'll break down the patch. So I'm doing things like muting my kick, low pass filtering and fading across to the B side. And that's just a nice groove with just an occasional modulation into a quirky sound, but we can make it super weird and fun. So the sound outside Clutch, I have this kick snare hi-hat pattern that's currently playing, muting that just off screen. I have a Chimera pitch down sampled sound, creating this glitchy background texture and a load of reverb. And here's the output of Clutch straight into the mix by itself. And I have this set where on the B side, I have some simple, just hi-hats playing a basic pattern with an open and closed trigger. There's some probability in them, so it's not always the same 1-bar loop, but it's largely a repeating pattern. And then on the A side, I'm in a bank of app 2600 sounds here. I started by modulating with the green trace here, the actual sample. And then I started modulating pitch with this blue trace and cable. And then an attenuated LFO to the release. And then just to push into a more standard hi-hat sound, another LFO. These are just unsynced triangles. That goes into the A-B blend. So I typically on the A side, when I want this all glitchy, sequenced, interesting sound effects, it's going to just push. You hear those, it's just push into a hi-hat occasionally through that modulation. But if I go to the B side, it's on the hi-hats and the negative values in the LFO, just leaning into those quirky sounds. And that's where I really enjoy it. It's just kind of part of a nice groove. Here's the drums. It's largely a hi-hat sound, but with an occasional boop, 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 boop. I think it just really adds to that groove. It feels really nice to me. But I do like, I'm going to mute the kick as I do this. Just going all out weird with it. Bringing in the Chimera sound effects again. Muting the kick. Let's go glitchy on that A side. So this patch is all about how hi-hats are the groove. They set the feel and tone, kind of swagger and head bob for this particularly wonky groove. If I just filter them back so they disappear in the mix. I like the patch. There's a nice subby bass in there. There's some nice affected kind of shaker tambourine-like texture thing. Good kick and snare. Bringing those hi-hats in. That just add that head bob and that swagger. And I'm doing a lot with the hi-hats. It's not particularly just a simple triggered hi-hat. And if you'd like to go through the rest of the patch, there's a Patreon bonus exclusive outlining all the patching and sequencing and modules. But let's just focus on Clutch here. So this is Clutch by itself. This started with setting up a side A. Closed hi-hat rhythm is the green tracing cable. Open hi-hat is blue. When they hit together, they're accents. And then I'm adding feel, holding to the right. It's just a slight level change that just adds that nice bit of movement to it. And then turning on the CV, let's go to pitch first. And I can't actually modulate with a negative pitch from my sequencer. So what I've done is start at a lower setting than I want. And then set the majority of the yellow tracing cable here, the majority of that sequencing higher, so it feels like it just ducks down on a certain step. So I'm sequencing higher nearly all the time, and then dropping down. And then I have some surface modulation, some sample select modulation, and there's a lot of variability in these, just slight movement and change in my sequencing to keep it exciting and moving. The B side, if I open these filters, is a washier, longer hi-hat. And that adds to these reels hi-hat samples really nicely. And you can play with that performatively. And then the two filters that I have selected, high pass. Just rolling off some low end. Same for the highs. This particular beat, I don't want the hats to be too bright. And then choke, I just have a random rhythm. If I set this to happen a lot of the time on a lot of steps, it's choking out most of the sound, but just randomly letting that trigger every now and then. Just choking sometimes. I've used an LED cable, so I hope you can see it flash. Let's bring the rest of the beat back in. So here we'll look at velocity and accents, separate to the feel, which you can use with it for kind of super dynamic free layer control. We're just going to use the velocity. So this sound is struck with a swung clock. Every 16th note is active, there's a little bit of swing, and you can hear just a simple pattern. Now the blue pattern is a different rhythm, blue trace on the scope there too. And as I patch that into the open hi-hat, well, let's do it without this one first, just so you can hear the open pattern. But because this is playing all the 16th notes, they're going to hit together, and that gives us our accent. And with this switch holding to the left, we can change whether an accent is a louder closed hi-hat, which it's currently set to, or if I hold it, red LED turns blue, and that accent is an open hi-hat. Now I like this closed, so I'll just hold again to go back. But one thing that's quite nice that we'll come to is not hitting every 16th note, maybe having probabilities in there, so sometimes an open will hit by itself, sometimes it will hit as an accent. And listen to the difference there, it's not huge, but from static to accented. There's this extra rhythm on top. And we can also play around with velocity, which by default is set to -5 to +5. So if I just take a -5 to +5 volt LFO, red LED means positive modulation, yellow is negative. We've got a much bigger range and swing of volume change. I have a sequence here, yellow, trace and cable. This is 0 to 5 volts. You can change this in the setup text file, but I don't feel the need to. And here's modulating velocity with a sequence. And it's mainly coming up to 5 volts on those offbeats relative to the kick and snare. And there's a lot of motion and life, but one thing I found that I like is, certainly with this red bank, when the sounds are very similar, actually modulating surface with something like this sequence feels more like a real drummer playing. And another cool thing, using an LFO to velocity, this really obvious LFO to volume, but if we speed this up, completely unrelated, it's just a free running triangle LFO. When this is at its 5 volt peak, it's pushing up an interesting rhythm and feel. Without it, we have our accent pattern, but with it, just this unrelated, and I'm just playing with the speed of it. Unrelated LFOs giving a great feel there. And let's add a little bit of probability to some steps triggering the closed hi-hat, this green trace and green cable. So sometimes we have open hi-hats coming through now as well. And again, if we just dial that in, release down a touch, take out some low end with the high pass. Super lively, dynamic hi-hats. So with this example, I really just wanted to make some techno, and specifically look at classic drum machine, classic hi-hat sounds for techno, and balancing them between closed and open hi-hat levels, which is something I can be a bit particular about when I'm mixing techno hi-hats. But of course with all the other features, ended up with a bit of a bigger patch than I maybe anticipated. So let's break down what's going on. I'll quickly run you through kind of everything else. Kick and clap from Trinity. Chunky pitch down Chimera percussion. Just really because there was a gap. There was a gap in the kind of frequency spectrum. I thought that would pitch down nicely, which it has. And then I have some reverb here, Isu's trifecta, playing off the clap, the clutch hi-hats, and some drone just in the reverb, so you're not actually hearing this low-pitched drone. That goes through Overseer, which I'm turning on and off with resonant, tilting stereo filter. And then clutch as the hats. I was kind of performatively shifting there from B round to A. Low-pass filtering as a performative, kind of smoother, more musical level control. But playing a balance, again, of B and A, just works really well. It's got this really produced, lovely sound when you start layering them. This control is set to be balance, BAL, where we're playing green tracing cables is my closed hi-hat rhythm, blue tracing cables is my open hi-hat rhythm. If I remove the CV, on beat 3, I have a closed hi-hat coming in a bit earlier, so it's cutting off that hi-hat that bit quicker. I like that as this kind of like abrupt interruption. It's got this kind of like jerk that comes around once every bar. The ability to balance that mix of closed and open. In this case, pushing towards the open. I want that to really push through. That's the driving energy in techno like this. The dynamic close stuff works well, but just leaning to that open. I play out just with a couple of little moves as I'm having fun. So here we're looking at the feel, your kind of shortcut to dynamic musical velocity changing hi-hat patterns. Now let's simplify this. In the background, if I just mute the sound, I have a kick and a snare, and let's just trigger this via straight 16th notes and turn off feel. And as I bring the hi-hats back in, I'll leave the kick and snare playing. Just straight kind of like machine gun blasting 16th note hi-hats. Let's enable feel. And straight away my kind of shoulders start moving. It's musical, it's interesting. Without it, which you just hold to the right to turn feel back off, back on. And when feel is on, you can toggle left and right to move through the patterns. Some of them are more drastic in their velocity level changes than others. Some are longer than others. And we can also use the accent to reset these patterns. With a switch held left and a green LED, we'll accent with a closed hi-hat, but when feel is on, that will also reset the pattern. So if I take a simple, just quarter note trigger into the open hi-hat, which will play at the same time as the 16th note, creating that accent. Hopefully you can hear and feel and see this LED. We've got some feel change, but we're not moving through that whole pattern now. If I move to just say resetting this pattern twice, so on kind of half notes, 1, 2, reset, reset, reset. Now let's move to more interesting rhythms. Quite nice there on that more subtle top end hi-hat than that bigger, thicker one. Doesn't have to be as full on and in your face as this example, of course. So let's just strip things right back and explore the effects. Underneath the clutch hi-hats is a basic kick and snare, and then the clutch hi-hats on top. A basic closed and open rhythm, and I have a B side here, longer pitch down samples that I might move to, and I'll maybe play with the release as I play with the effects as well. So we have 3 parameters for the effects. The bank button, which has the dotted border around the text to hold for effects. And then these 2 that are assignable become your effects parameter and effects intensity. So if I hold this, you see a white flashing LED, and that's effects mode 1. We use these. We use this switch to move through your effects types. So you see that LED changing colour. We'll leave this on, but you simply hold this to come back out of that mode again. So hold for effects, flashing white, effects 1, sputter distortion. And there's this great kind of like crackly, if I move to those longer pitch down sounds, like crunchy, crackly fuzziness. The next effect, just going back to the main sounds here. Red is a Bitcrush distortion. That's like your dry wet. And then a down sample, Bitcrush. Green is a comb filter. And I'll stick dry wet here, about 50-50. Blue is a DJ style filter, so again this is a dry wet, and then this becomes your DJ style filter, high passing, nicely resonant, and then low passing. Going across to orange, this is actually a dub echo. It's nice setting up that bit of echo. And then in cyan we have a chorus. Let's try chorus on those longer B-side sounds. Then in violet we actually have a reverb. Well, it's a nice kind of primitive, reflective, lo-fi verb. then the final effect in yellow, they're just calling glitch. It's just like kind of data corruption, fax machine, dial-up modem. So I'll highlight any time I use effects throughout the video, but I just wanted to give a really simple example of them. So one other thing with the effects is that you can get in and out of controlling them temporarily. Here's Clutch on its own. Like a struck tambourine sound on the B side. Open closed hat on the A side. And as we did, you hold the bank to get into the effects. You then set the parameters. Let's say Bitcrush it. Now as you come back out of that effects mode, holding bank again, those effects remain, and these knobs go back to controlling whatever they're set to, let's say the filters. But there is another way to get in and out of controlling the effects, which is momentary, and that's simply to hold on to that button and then make your adjustments. So if I hold this time, I'm in the red effect there, I could change the effect, make my adjustments, and then as I let go, because I'm still holding, I'm back to the colour of the bank LED, the effects are still on, and these are back to controlling, again, whatever the switches have set them to. So the drums in, into effects mode, holding temporarily, let's do like a reverby thing, that's going to remain. So here's a patch I was playing around with just quickly here, playing around with ideas of velocity and dynamics. And the idea was to create some pitch motion, but also kind of a sidechain on the velocity. Let's listen to Clutch out directly. So I have a pattern, green trace and cables with some ratchets in them, some bursts. And I want to make one of those bursts fade in. So I've taken an envelope and offset it, like creating a sidechain signal for a VCA. So the velocity here will be offset high, and then an envelope is inverted to duck it back down and bring it back up again. So let's patch that into velocity. You can hear it's a bit louder. I'm playing around with the envelope time and the amount of it mixed in with that offset there. I've then done a similar thing, offsetting up to a higher pitch signal and bringing that down in pitch with some of those bursts. So if I bring the pitch down as a bass level, and then add this voltage, we're getting kind of an offbeat pattern. But. Could play with release and really dial this in against the beat, so I'll do that. In fact, let's first add some feel. Automatically playing around with dynamics now. On top of that ducking and those pitch changes, it's a nice dynamic pattern to put against a simple set of drum samples. Finding the right sound, I might set this back a bit by losing some top ends. And just a bit of a synth sound just for some musical colour. A simple idea for some pitch and velocity movement. So here we've turned Clutch into a kind of volt per octave tracking, kind of mega overtone sync-like patch generating oscillator. It's playing into some filtering and some effects. And there's a square wave in there that I'm used to triggering that we're also hearing. If I remove that to start with, this is Clutch. Let's get rid of the effects. Into a filter. So the patch starts with a square wave oscillator. This is simple, just utility analog VCO. It's the square wave here, and I'm using that to Audiorate trigger Clutch. It's the closed hi-hat, but we could do that with the open hi-hat as well. Let's just listen to the square. It's a simple tone that I'm sure many of you have heard before. So that triggering Clutch gives us this sound, and we can play around with repitching, the release shortens the sounds down enough that they're almost just like a little formant, a little kind of pulsar synthesis like sound within this square wave that then triggers it again. The onboard filters go a long way. And it's got kind of all the overtones of like really complex, like FM, AM, ring mod, West Coast synthesis like overtones. So if we then start to play around with pitch sequencing the oscillator that's triggering Clutch, so let's unmute that so you can hear it. This square wave oscillator is now playing a melody, a pattern, that's triggering this, so muting the square again. This is now Clutch. Just opening those filters. It's like hard sync. It's like this is set at one static pitch. It's being reset hard synced by something that's playing a melody. So it's triggered by something that's been pitch sequenced. And the pitch here isn't a volt per octave input, it's just a sample rate input that works really well for drums. But we could just send that volt per octave in as well to get some pitch tracking in the overtones that this creates on top of the square. So volt per octave to the square triggering it, and now to Clutch as well. So let's put the square in, and then unmute this on top of it. But by itself, makes for an interesting sound source for, say, VCAs, low-pass gates, in this case a low-pass filter. If I engage a low-pass filter with no modulation, and then modulate the filter with an envelope, so it's like this is a standard oscillator into a filter now. Something I really like doing with drums, just Audiorate triggering them, sequencing the thing that's triggering them, and do some things on there like pitch tracking to get that to follow the different changes. Works great on its own or with that square. Here's that square through the filter. And then this on top, just unmuting it. So there's Clutch. Like a weird Audiorate oscillator, and I really like weird. If you've got this far in the video, drop a Clutch sync in the comments. What are you using for hi-hats? Do you fancy a Clutch or something else? Let us know and head to patreon.com/DivKid to support what we do and gain access to exclusives, and we'll see you next time. Bye!